You are listening to the Why Smart Women podcast, the podcast that helps smart women work out why we repeatedly make the wrong decisions and how to make better ones. From relationships, career choices, finances, to faux fur jackets and kale smoothies. Every moment of every day, we're making decisions. Let's make them good ones. I'm your host, Annie McCubbin, and as a woman of a certain age, I've made my own share of really bad decisions. Not my husband. I don't mean him, though. I did go through some shockers to find him. And I wish this podcast had been around to save me from myself. This podcast will give you insights into the working of your own brain, which will blow your mind. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording, and you are listening on this day. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Well, hello, smart women, and welcome back. This is part 2 of our analysis of Louis Theroux's The Manosphere.
So let me actually plot the way that the Manosphere creates a distortion. This is how it works. Step 1, they cherry pick. To use your term, they use the biological shorthand. You know, evolution made men want many partners, and women want one stable partner. So
and just to cook sourdough,
and to cook sourdough and wear a nice frock. This is partly true, but it is oversimplified, and that's how it happened. But somewhere in there is actually a real signal that finds its way into the minds of these young men. The second step in the Manosphere's narrative manipulation is the moral slide. Okay, so if evolution made men and women like this, therefore men are supposed to dominate and pursue abundance. Women are supposed to serve and submit. This is the natural order. And
are you ready for your morning tea? Now?
Me?
Yeah, would you like me to get your morning tea now?
Oh, yeah. Yes, please. Off you go.
Okay.
Fast.
Right.
Don't interrupt me again.
Okay. Sorry.
I want it noted that Annie tells me not to interrupt her, and I generally obey.
Sorry about the cough.
Okay, but so let me try and thread together these thoughts again. So number 1, you've got the biological shorthand. Number 2, you've got the moral slide.
Please really explain the moral slide.
Well, I think, didn't I just explain the moral?
Just re-explain it.
Okay,
I didn't get it.
A moral slide is when you cherry pick the science and then you elevate it to a moral level. Okay, the moral level is men are supposed to dominate, women are supposed to submit. This is the natural order, they say, but here is where you lose the science entirely. A tendency is not a mandate. A description is not a prescription. They've jumped from the biology to a moral hierarchy without any logical bridge. And let me just do the third part. The next step in their story is that they do the martyr reversal. Okay, men are the real victims of feminism, which is against nature. See, now they've made themselves oppressed truth-tellers, and anyone who challenges their argument becomes the enemy of reality itself. And so, in critical thinking parlance, we call this special pleading, and it's one of the oldest fallacies in the book. You provoke a principle. Invoke to provoke. You invoke a principle selectively to justify a conclusion that you already hold.
Well, that's really motivated reasoning, isn't it? You use data to support a position that you hold. What's the difference between motivated reasoning and special pleading?
Okay, well, no, motivated reasoning is a cognitive error. So it's an error of perception. You find yourself reasoning something without being aware that it's actually motivated by self-interest. So you don't see clearly. Special pleading is a logical fallacy. It's something that follows.
I see.
Yeah. So it's saying it's a way of explaining it.
Yeah,
post hoc, retrospectively. Yeah. And you were saying before that, these philosophies and practices and behaviours around the subjugation of women are not new. They've been happening ever since Adam was a lad. The patriarchal institutions of extreme religion are doing exactly the same thing.
So before we get onto the patriarchal Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What I'm saying is that the and you know who they are, the extreme religious fundamentalists of all shape and colour. They use God instead of the science of genes. You know that there is an authority figure that says this is the way that it should be, and the Manosphere has just sort of changed the authority figure. But the self-interest is identical.
And they have absolutely zero comprehension or analysis about their positioning, right? Also, the rampant hypocrisy in the fact that so many of them make money from the females in their thrall being on OnlyFans, and yet they loathe them for it. So what they want is a virginal wife, right?
Yeah.
So they don't they don't respect the women, but they use the women. So the thinking, that notion of contrarianism in the thinking seems to be completely non-problematic. And to your point before, they keep saying things like fact. It's just fact.
Yeah.
This is fact. Now, back to that notion of when somebody charismatic says something with great certainty, what we know is it bypasses any critical thinking in the receiver's ears. And so they're very, very, they're very certain. And but the hypocrisy was, a friend of mine sent me a picture of herself with a hand over her mouth watching it because it was so sort of stunning. But it's not new. It's not new. It's just, as to your point, it's a big fat business model like the wellness, right?
And so, look, the next part of the discussion talks about why it actually feels like a religion. You know, religions are great business models. If you can get people to believe something and to practice that belief, then you've got a really sticky customer. So yes, they've elevated the misogyny to a religious pitch, and we can understand the way that works, the way that seems to work, by revisiting another moral philosopher, Jonathan Haidt.
I love this. It's The Rider and the Elephant, right?
It is The Rider and the Elephant. So Jonathan Haidt, with others, created what's called moral foundation theory. And moral foundation theory shows that human moral reasoning is not primarily logical. It's intuitive. And the metaphor that they use is the rider thinks that he's steering the elephant, but the elephant just goes wherever it wants to, and then the rider constructs the reasons. And so the formula is intuition first, justification second.
And that notion will not be new to any of our regular listeners, because pretty much this entire podcast sort of keeps circling around the central idea that we are irrational, that we feel like we're making rational decisions, but actually our decisions are made in the emotional part of our brain and post-rationalized in the prefrontal cortex. And of course, as we know, in terms of the marketing from the Manosphere, you are looking at boys, 14, 15, 16, into their mid-20s, when their prefrontal cortexes, as we unfortunately know, are incredibly underdeveloped. So, they can stand around going, I can do what I want because, women have all the advantage. Because what did one of them say? Because she had tits. Is that what he said?
Yeah, women have advantages because they're born with tits and a vagina.
Yeah.
And so they can get whatever they want.
Yeah, and when you're 21 years old and you're really hot, apparently, you can get on any boat that you want, whereas a boy can't. And I mean, just the contextual narrowness of that is so breathtaking that all women are going to be, in the position where they're 21, hot, and available and desirous of getting on some guy's boat.
You don't much like getting on boats anyway, do you?
I don't like boats because when you get on the boat, when you're 21 and hot, do you think that they give you like seasickness tablets? Because that's what I'd need if I got on a boat. I wouldn't like the boat.
So
just saying.
So again, how is it that these guys have been so successful, and understanding moral foundation theory, I think is really helpful. So just a quick summary of that. Haidt's theory distinguishes between the basic moral intuitions that people are just born with. You know, one of them is care, you know, the tendency to care for the people around you. Another one is fairness as opposed to cheating. You know, we have an instinct. Babies don't need to go to school to get a sense of what is fair and who's cheating. Another one is loyalty as opposed to betrayal. Another is authority as opposed to subversion.
Another one is sanctity as opposed to degradation, and liberty as opposed to oppression. But can I ask you something about that?
Yep.
You often hear that without religion we would be immoral and not know how to behave, and that sort of flies in the face of that, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Their scientific research absolutely verifies the fact that we're not born a blank slate, that we are born with these moral intuitions. Now, we're not born with the same ones, and they are shaped by culture, but the research shows that men and women similarly value care and fairness, but religious and traditionalist men tend to emphasize authority, loyalty, and sanctity more than secular women do.
And that's really interesting because, of course, this, in terms of, you were talking before about how this is echoed in extreme religions, right? Mm. And, of course, if you look at trad wives, right, which is the sort of the extreme Christian right, this idea that they need to go back to an earlier state of grace where women were. No, it's not the Garden of Eden. Okay, it's actually they talk about going back to traditional roles, right? But in fact, the traditional roles are nonsense. This is the traditional roles of the 1950s. But throughout history, women have not stayed at home, cooked, cleaned, and been subservient to their husbands. Traditionally, throughout history, women worked. It's only been a very brief period. Mm-hmm. In the 50s, see, in the Second World War, women had to work. Women have always worked in the fields. Women have worked in factories. It's nonsense that women stayed at home.
I think what you were saying was that the trad wife, that prescription that women should behave like this, subservient, that women should behave like this. Again, look, it's cherry picking history. Mm. It's there's a retrospective optimism bias, you know, that things used to be great and now they're not. If I could go back to Haidt's moral foundations theory, I think the point that I was making earlier on is that there is a tendency for men to value authority, loyalty, sanctity, and liberty more than women do. And so this is what the Manosphere capitalizes on. They say, okay, authority. They appeal to authority by saying this is the natural order.
And I know what women want.
And I know what women want. Look, they appeal to the value of loyalty by saying, you know, we need to protect the tribe. You know, the brothers need to be supported here. They appeal to the foundation, the moral foundation of sanctity by somehow making masculinity sacred. When actually, when you look at the way that these Muppets carry on, it's all a bit homoerotic. Let's be honest. And then they appeal to the value of liberty by railing against the way that men have been oppressed.
And of course, that's what those four things: the natural order, authority, protecting the tribe, loyalty, upholding sacred masculinity, sanctity, and male oppression, is exactly the principles that drive the trad wives. Yeah. That we have lost our way, that men should be in charge, that men should be making the decision. You should be at home with a sourdough starter, right, in an apron, producing children. And of course, underneath it all as well is this idea of a white dominance, that white women need to be at home and producing babies. So this trad wife adherence to a red pill manosphere ideology, it's dangerous. And of course, as we know, David, as we well know, the more you have these sort of principles, up goes domestic violence because men can do what they damn well want.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess, before we leave this moment, in summary, the science of biology does explain why some sexual and dominance-related inclinations or instincts exist, and then these things are then cherry-picked and they are interpreted, these inclinations, as moral imperatives. And that's why they have such power. That explains the zeal. And when you challenge a Manosphere follower, you're not just disagreeing with an argument, you're triggering a moral immune response. They feel attacked at every level of identity and tribe and sacred order. That's why they don't debate. That's why they can't debate.
Well, they can't.
Instead, they just perform outrage. And again, if we go back to the source and the science, Jonathan Haidt is clear. These foundations are descriptive. They are not prescriptive. And the fact that authority and loyalty feel like moral truth to someone doesn't make them moral truth. It makes them a feeling which is in search of a justification. So, let's make this land somewhere.
Well, because the point is, what do we do? What are we going to do? Because we're in enough trouble, I think, geopolitically at the moment, with the Muppets that are in charge of. Let's not even go near the war. But we don't need this, and it all feeds in because they all support Trump, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think once again we're actually at a point of first just addressing reality. I don't know exactly what needs to be done or what can be done at scale, but let's just start with what I actually believe is going on. So yes, evolutionary biology shaped different psychological tendencies in men and women. Great. Yes, those tendencies are heritable and they are real. Let's not pretend otherwise. That's the blank slate era that Steve Pinker has spent a life, his whole career dismantling. But the same evolutionary pressures that shaped male competition and women, female selectivity also gave us empathy. It gave us pair bonding. It gave us reciprocal altruism. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And it also gave us the capacity to build culture. Human beings are the species that invented law and medicine and art and love, none of which are optimal gene replication strategies. We can choose. And here's the move that the Manosphere never makes. If you follow Triver's logic honestly, okay, female choice, right? The smart woman selecting carefully. If you follow the logic that is not contrary to biology, it actually is biology and it is functioning correctly. The Manosphere's project is to eliminate female choice, to eliminate it. And that's not evolution. That's actually cheating at evolution.
Hang on, how are they eliminating that? Because they say you don't get to choose, I get to choose you. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
so
that's
I'm a
it.
female and I'm 21 and hot and I can get in a boat. So I get to choose you, the female, in whatever sort of construct I want. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's the mistake that they made. If they want to call on evolution and say that evolution justifies what it is they are doing, then they are ignoring the fact that evolution has given women, smart women, a choice. That, again, you boil it right down, guys want to be spreading their seed as wide as they possibly can. If we were to be that simplistic, women get to choose. And this is the thing that the boys don't seem to realise. They don't seem to factor it in. What was really interesting in the Thoreau documentary was every time we had a woman who had a relationship to the Manosphere influencer, it was H.S. Tikitoki's mum. It was Myron's girlfriend. And
my God, yeah. Myron's girlfriend. So he's standing there in his deeply unattractive way, saying that he was going to have multiple wives,
multiple girlfriends,
wives, and she's sort of standing there going, hang on, I don't know about that. And of course, the classic.
Then he went and told her to tidy up.
He told her to tidy up, clean the room. Oh God, he's so awful. The classic, the real clanger, which I thought was a super smart way to finish the documentary. They must have, Thoreau's team the filmmakers, the cameraman must have arrived before him, because it finished with HS. I really wish I could stop calling him HS Tiki Toki. What's his frigging name? Harrison Sullivan. It's ridiculous. HS Tiki Toki. Anyway, he's there and the mother is standing there going, look, we've got guests. There's water on the floor, making him clean up the water on the floor like a little boy.
Yeah.
And there you have this sort of awful sort of window into the reality of these boys' lives where they're obviously all damaged. But do you know what? A bit I don't care. I don't care that they're damaged.
You don't care.
Come on, get a bit of moral spine. Stop selling your disgusting product.
I guess back to your question, what do we do about it? And they are going to do what they do. They're going to believe what they believe. They're going to wreak the havoc that they're going to wreak if we allow it to. At the risk of stating the obvious, I think those of us who want a better future and better adjusted young men who can make a contribution, we've got to engage with them. My advice is probably too difficult for a 14-year-old to understand. And so I guess the work that I've got to do is to try and make it simple and real and interesting and capture their attention. But what I really want to say to these boys who are influenced by the selective use of science, the elevation of it to a moral argument, is to say that a good life is not about the maximisation of gene replication. Right? Maybe once upon a time on the savannah, when things were really tough for human beings, that's what we needed to do. We are not there now. We have evolved.
But they don't, that's not what's driving them, is it? That they're not driven by a need for maximum gene replication.
Have you listened to anything that I've been saying?
I have listened to it, but on a conscious level, in talking about arguing, in trying to have some discourse with them, they're not going to care for that argument.
Okay. Look, that's right. They may not care for that. I'm saying that this is the mechanism that Andrew Tate and HS Tiki Toki and Sneeko and all those pelicans are using. This is why they are powerful. And this is, I guess, the counter-argument. And maybe it doesn't need to be put on a T-shirt or, made into a sitcom
a mug,
a sitcom, something like that. Look, this is just the position, and it describes the inadequate place that I am right now. If we remember that a good life is actually the exercise of all of our human capacities. It is the exercise of reason, it's friendship, it's creativity, it's about dignity and opportunity. That's available to every individual regardless of gender. And anyone who tells you that your biology has already decided your place in the world, your role, and who gets power over you or who you get to have power over, they're not telling you the truth. They're actually selling something to you. And if I could just pull something out of your playbook, Annie, that when someone is selling you something, you ask, whose truth is this that you're peddling, and who profits?
Where's the evidence? Right?
Yep.
And I'd like to add something, if I may. It was King Solomon. It was King Solomon that had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Did you know that? Apparently. Yep.
What, wise Solomon?
Yeah. Wise Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Like, what the hell?
Well, so clearly those people back then were as capable of making exactly the same errors as we are today. Look, there was one other thing that I noticed in the documentary, and I don't know exactly where I placed this, but I've got an idea, and that was that 3 of the 4 Manosphere influences that they profiled, HS, Tiki Toki, Sneeko, and Myron Gaines, I think, I can't remember. All of these men were coffee coloured. They had come from a racial minority.
Exactly.
And I couldn't help wondering, okay, with each of them, I think there was an absent father or there was an absent father influence in their lives, and so they were trying to seek power in some way with a missing dad. But also I wondered whether the discrimination and bias against their skin colour, that their response to that was also a factor in creating such an extreme
ideological platform
in which they make themselves powerful.
And it's so interesting. I was saying to David this morning that, you know, every time or so often Louis Theroux would say something to them and one of them would go, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a shit. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. And is there any greater statement that indicates that you actually do give a fuck than somebody continually saying, I don't give a fuck. Aggressively. And, you know, we're back at that very, which I'm hopefully going to be talking to the snarky gherkin with this week, is this notion of elevating anti-intellectualism as the truth. That when somebody says something that's simple and appeals to you emotionally, somehow it's the truth. And anything nuanced and with an intellectual basis is viewed with suspicion. And it's a very, very dangerous place because, of course, those voices are now amplified because of social media, right?
Yeah.
So that, you know, a simple idea, unfortunately, is going to have way more cut through than a complex idea. And as we know, a lie once told is remembered, but the refutation of the lie has no cut through and is often forgotten. So we all have to be really, really careful about what we listen to, what we believe, what we share. And for all of you, I mean, we are in the very fortunate position of our children are both older now and have very, very good critical thinking skills. So we sort of aren't in the position where we're trying to actually have discourse about these ideas because they're smarter than both of us. But for those of you that have children, I really firmly believe that these things do need to be outed, that he did do the right thing by giving these voices a platform, because when they are questioned, their responses inevitably are inadequate and their platforms, are shown to be paper tigers with no basis in reality or intellectual rigor. So that's what we think about it. Did you want to say something, David? Is it about the concubine moving into the second room?
No, I wasn't going to do that. But this is just, I guess, a little a corollary or a footnote, and maybe I'm identifying the elephant in the room. When Annie and I were talking about this, and I wanted to go into the science and the logic and the reason, as is my want, that is the way that I tend to go.
I do too.
I said, I know you do, but I go so much further into it that you have to tell me to shut up and stop making it so theoretical. No, I just want to call out the elephant in the room. I was worried about mansplaining the manosphere.
That's funny.
And I also recognise that the sources of inspiration and knowledge and research that I drew upon, Steven Pinker, Richard Dawkins, Jonathan Haidt, notice the pattern? They are all men. And so this particular, narrative is coming from the minds of men, and this is why Annie's work and her writing and her discourse is so important. That
Anyway, so
you took the microphone.
Oh, you had to, because also you remember that the American guy, he's standing up there with Louis, and he goes, "Well, you look around you. What have women built? What have women built?"
Oh my God.
Oh, my God. So, and Louis had to say, well, look at the buildings, and women build any of this? Yes. And Louis had to say, well, do you know that for a fact? Fact. It's a fact. Men create things. So men create things, and women efficiently use sourdough starters and have lots of white babies, apparently.
Anyway, sorry about that.
It's all right. I don't care.
Had to call it out.
All right. So thank you so much, David, for your contribution. And thank you so much, smart women and smart men, because I know I've got some nice blokes that are now tuning in. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And as always, stay safe, stay well, keep your critical thinking hats on. See you later. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of our analysis on Louis Theroux's The Manosphere. And as always, stay safe, stay well, keep your critical thinking hats on. See you later. Bye. Thanks for tuning into Why Smart Women with me, Annie McCubbin. I hope today's episode has ignited your curiosity and left you feeling inspired by my anti-motivational style. Join me next time as we continue to unravel the fascinating layers of our brains and develop ways to sort out the fact from the fiction and the over 6,000 thoughts we have in the course of every day. Remember, intelligence isn't enough. You can be as smart as paint, but it's not just about what you know, it's about how you think. And in all this talk of whether or not you can trust your gut, if you ever feel unsafe, whether it's in the street, at work, in a car park, in a bar, or in your own home, please respect that gut feeling. Staying safe needs to be our primary objective. We can build better lives, but we have to stay safe to do that. And don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast and share it with your fellow smart women and allies. Together, we're hopefully reshaping the narrative around women and making better decisions. So until next time, stay sharp, stay savvy, and keep your critical thinking hat shiny. This is Annie McCubbin signing off from Why Smart Women. See you later. This episode was produced by Harrison Hess. It was executive produced and written by me, Annie McCubbin.